Hi, thanks, Raylan. I'm Tobias Romer with Olufsen Environmental. I manage the Spartina monitoring program for the Invasive Spartina project. First, I want to say it's pretty awesome seeing this many people here collected to talk about living shorelines and our tidal wetlands. I think we all know that they're pretty important portions of the bay. Um, and we focus a lot, specifically with how Spartina impacts those shorelines and marshes. So as I'm sure we all know, our tidal wetlands are where the fresh water of the uplands come and meet the saline waters of the ocean in the estuary. They're kind of the vegetated upper mudflats, and they're really important for a lot of animals, for a lot of ecosystem function. And unfortunately, we have lost over 85% of them since the 1800s, uh, largely due to human actions. We developed a lot of them, we filled a lot of them, some for agricultural development, some for residential and commercial, some for airports. A lot of them were levied off for commercial salt production. Um, so those are the big threats that kind of took away 85% of our marshes in recent history. We do still have ongoing threats, and I think that's where living shorelines comes in a lot, is combating climate change, and we're faced with our remaining wetlands potentially drowning due to sea level rise. We do also have impacts from invasive species, which is where we come in. Um, so. We had all this tidal marsh loss over the last century plus, which was kind of recognized in the mid 1900s, and the shift there was a big shift away from developing and filling our marshes to conserving what we have left, and then trying to restore some of them back, which is great. Um, Unfortunately, there was one consequence of that in the mid 1970s. East Coast cordgrass was introduced from the East Coast to San Francisco Bay as part of a restoration project. They're trying to consolidate dredge spoils and build up a marsh in Union City. Unfortunately, what happened is that the East Coast species hybridized with our native species of cordgrass. Spartina foliosa, or Pacific cordgrass. It is the only native Spartina species that we have in San Francisco Bay, in California, even. So it then hybridized in presumably maybe like the 80s or so, and it started growing very differently than our native species. It started colonizing mudflats and converting mudflats to just big meadows of this tall grass. And it was causing major landscape shifts that, you know, roused attention. It was starting to get noticed. So then in the mid 90s, it was finally identified what was going on by the Strong Lab at UC Davis, that this was a hybrid. It had hybridized, and then it had back crossed. So it had rehybridized, uh, so that the pure alterniflora could hybridize with the foliosa, but then the hybrid progeny could also back cross, could rehybridize with the foliosa and with hybrid and with alterniflora. So it created what's called a hybrid swarm, um, meaning there are lots of different genetic kind of pools of hybrids, and they all behave and act a little bit differently. So why is this a problem? Well, the hybrids generally do more than either of the parent species. They can grow taller and denser, higher and lower in the tidal regime. And what this translates to, what people were noticing, is that this plant outcompetes all the other marsh species and develops a monoculture, and a monoculture that's not as valuable for most wildlife. It spreads across the mudflats, which converts very valuable shorebird habitat. San Francisco Bay is of hemispheric importance for shorebirds, and this will colonize those mudflats and basically take away that habitat. While doing that, it also changes the invertebrates that were in the mudflats. Things that were up near the top get crowded out by big, dense root masses and get replaced by, much deeper burrowing species. Um, it's also models prove that, or predicted that this hybrid threatens the very existence of our native cordgrass. It's so competitive that it would pollen swamp the native cordgrass and eventually just be out competed so that Pacific cordgrass would go extinct. Additionally, and Geeta brought this up before, it contributes to flooding. It reduces flood control capacity by crowding out our flood control channels. In so doing, it also then ponds water, which creates a breeding habitat for mosquitoes, which of course we've got concerns about vector-borne illnesses. But largely what impacts this group is that this plant undermines all of our native tidal marsh restoration, including in the marshes themselves, as well as stuff down on the mudflats and some more living shorelines areas. How this happens, I already mentioned, uh, the hybrid grows taller, like physically taller. It grows a lot denser. But one of its biggest impacts is that it grows higher and lower in the tidal regime. It can deal with drier situations and wetter situations. So what we're looking at here, the upper left and right-hand corners are kind of a marsh zonation going from high to low, going from upland on the left down to the subtidal on the right. And the upper left hand, that little orange bar, is the fairly narrow elevation range that our native Spartina foliosa can grow in. The hybrid, however, on the right, upper right, can grow all the way up to the upland edge and then down into the mudflat, verging on kind of the the lower edge of mudflat. So, with all of this and recognition that the bay was being converted by this plant, that's when San Francisco Estuary Invasive Spartina project was formed. We were formed in 2000. We are regionally coordinated, so trying to bring together all the different landowners and agencies and practitioners, all of the involved people together, and are co-directed by our federal lead, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, our state lead, the Coastal Conservancy, and our NGO lead, California Invasive Plant Council. Marilyn mentioned this before, but I'm going to reiterate. We began full-scale treatment in 2005. So that's when we start finally seeing declines in the bay. What does this look like for us to do this work? We have about 70,000 acres of potential Spartina habitat in the bay that we try to cover every year. We've got a fairly small but mighty team of about 20 people who try and cover all this ground. It's a lot of work. Um, but so every year we try and inventory all the areas that are under uh, known or suspected risk from hybrid Spartina, and then conduct same year treatment of those plants. So say we'll go out in July and map a marsh. We might then go out in August and treat those plants that we detected. And we do this every year. So a problem with this is that, we can get rid of hybrid from a marsh, but as long as hybrid exists elsewhere, it's producing seed and it's producing pollen that can then that can pollinate native and create more seeds that float on the tides. And so we very successfully have gotten rid of a lot of hybrid Spartina. But while it's still out there, it keeps popping up. So we just need to keep being very resilient in this. So this is where we're at today. Here is a timeline. I know the text is very small, so if you can't see that, on the left is 2004. On the right is 2024. So this is 2 decades this is showing how much hybrid Spartina is in the bay. It peaks in 2005 when we started treatment at 805 acres, which is now, this last year, we're at about 20 acres. So it's almost a 98% reduction bay-wide, which is great. However, 60%, 66% of our remaining hybrid infestation in the bay are in three sites, in San Leandro Bay and Hayward. These are sites that we are not treating yet, but we are planning on beginning in the near future. These three sites we stopped treating to try and conserve habitat for an endangered bird species, California Ridgway's rail. In addition to that two-thirds, another 4.5 acres, or about 22% of the bay, is on Bear Island, which is part of Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge off of Redwood City. And it's really important for us to control these remaining big infestations because they threaten all the other efforts around the bay. So our progress has brought us, we've got about 220 sites. 153 of those have less than 10 square meters, so it's gone way down. About 60 of those have been reduced to zero. So we are making a lot of progress. How this looks, here's another timeline. 2005 on the left, then 2010, 2015, and 2024 on the right. Generally, what you're looking at is level of infestation and its distribution. Dark orange means there's more than an acre of hybrid. Dark green means that there is none. And then the blue on the far right are places where there used to be hybrid, but there has not now been for more than 3 years. Notice that generally Central and South Bay used to be really infested, getting a lot better. There's still some strongholds. Um, One thing to note also is that so if you look from 2005 to 2010, it expanded up into North Bay. But then we have that mostly controlled by 2015 and even better controlled by 2024. Unfortunately, a new infestation kind of popped up over in Sassoon, which was also very likely brought in by people. Um, I bring this up because here's that same look at that same kind of a map. This is overlaying known and near future plans for Living Shorelines projects. I just want to kind of communicate and share their proximity with known infestations of hybrid Spartina, and that we should really work together and communicate a lot, coordinate a lot to make sure that this plant does not negatively impact any of your guys' work. I think that that is about where I'm going to stop and hand it off to Jeannie. Jeannie?